Welcome back, guys, to Fear Begins, a step towards the horror. In today's episode, I'm sharing 8 true disturbing stories about creepy encounters in Appalachia. So grab your headphones, turn down the lights, and get ready, because once you hear these stories, you might never look at the mountains the same way again. But before we begin, please consider subscribing and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. My parents owned this old cabin way out in the Appalachian foothills. My grandfather built it long before paved roads ever reached that area. If you want to find it, you have to follow a dirt track for what feels like forever, then hike another half-mile on foot. It's isolated in the purest sense. The cabin itself is simple: 1 room, creaky wooden floor, an old wood stove for heat, and a propane lantern for light. No electricity, no plumbing, and definitely no cell service. It's the kind of place where you realize how loud your own breathing sounds when the world goes quiet. My parents mostly used it during hunting season. The rest of the year it just sat there collecting dust and raccoon tracks. I had been out there plenty of times with family or friends, but this time I decided to go alone. I had just finished one of those brutal stretches at school where the days blurred together. 3 weeks of barely sleeping, living off coffee, turning in papers at 3 in the morning. My brain was fried. I didn't want to see another screen or hear another notification. I just wanted silence. And the cabin was perfect for that. Friday afternoon, I parked at the end of the track. You can't drive all the way unless you want to destroy your suspension. I slung my pack over my shoulder and hiked in. Within minutes, I was regretting how much I packed when I finally saw the cabin. Through the trees, a wave of calm hit me, like stepping off the grid in the truest sense. The first night was perfect. I lit a fire, cooked something simple, just a can of chili in a pot, and read by lantern until my eyes felt like sandpaper. Around midnight, I locked the door, deadbolt and all, checked the windows twice. Out here you double-check everything. Surrounded by endless dark forest. Then I crashed on the old bed that had been there longer than I'd been alive. The next morning, something was wrong. It wasn't a sound or smell, just this heavy feeling that settled over me as soon as I opened my eyes. Then I saw it. The door was unlocked. I knew I had locked it, deadbolted it. I even remembered twisting the knob to be sure. Out here you don't skip that. But the bolt was thrown back. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe I was tired and forgot. Maybe I didn't turn it fully. But the thought stuck with me all day. By evening, I told myself to let it go. I cooked, cleaned up, then sat on the porch. The silence out there messes with your head. Every squirrel sounds like a bear. Every twig snap feels personal. And when the sun goes down, it doesn't fade, it just drops. The world becomes pitch black. Around 11, I was inside, rocking gently in the old chair by the stove, half dozing when I heard it. Something stepped onto the porch, not light steps but heavy and slow. Each board let out a long, aching groan. I froze. My eyes went straight to the door. Another creak, then silence. I didn't even breathe. My heart hammered in my throat. 10 seconds, 20, maybe a minute passed, nothing. Finally, I reached for the rifle in the corner, careful not to make a sound. I crept to the window. The glass was old and wavy, so everything outside looked warped. The yard was just shadows and shapes. I told myself it was a deer, maybe a bear, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I locked the door again, checked it twice, then shoved a chair under the handle. Sleep never came. Every creak of the cabin sounded magnified. Every pop from the stove felt like footsteps. Around 3 in the morning, my eyes snapped open again. Something was different. Light was sliding across the far wall. Not firelight, not the lantern. A pale glow from outside. I sat up slowly, throat dry, and looked out the window. There was something in the yard. At first I thought I was hallucinating from exhaustion, but then it moved. A figure, tall, impossibly tall, thin in a broken, fragile way, like a scarecrow stretched too far. It just stood there with its head tilted back, like it was sniffing the air. Its skin looked gray under the moon, same tone as the trees. Then it turned, slow and jerky like its joints didn't fit, until it faced the cabin. The moonlight caught its eyes, two pale metallic glints. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My fingers dug into the window frame. It didn't walk like a person. It slid forward, legs moving wrong. I yanked the rifle up, my hands trembling so badly I could hardly keep it level. But it didn't come closer. It just stood there watching. Then without a sound it turned and slipped back into the trees like it had never been. I sat awake until dawn, rifle in my lap. Eyes locked on the window. Every sound outside felt like a countdown. When daylight came I stepped outside, and my stomach dropped. Tracks in the dirt. Not human. Not any animal I'd seen. 4 long toes ending in blunt claws. The prints were deep. Whatever made them was heavy. They circled the cabin twice. I wanted to leave, but the thought of walking half a mile through the woods, knowing that thing was out there, froze me. I stayed all day, rifle across my lap, eyes darting from the windows to the door. The forest was silent. No birds, no bugs, nothing. When the sun dropped again, dread set in. I knew it would return. And it did. Just after midnight, the boards groaned under something heavy, slow, deliberate. Steps across the porch, then a tap on the window. I didn't move, didn't blink. Another tap. Then a long scraping sound against the wall like claws dragging on the wood. And then a voice, low, guttural, like someone forcing words through a throat full of gravel. At first it was nonsense, just wrong, but slowly it began shaping into something. My name, I don't know how it knew, but it said my name again and again, circling the cabin, tapping, scraping, repeating my name like it was practicing. At some point exhaustion took me, and I blacked out. When I opened my eyes, sunlight was streaming through the window. I stepped outside and froze. More tracks, dozens of them. Not just around the cabin, but on the porch, right up to the door. Carved into the dirt were lines, shapes, symbols maybe. I didn't look long enough to figure them out. I grabbed my pack and ran. Didn't stop until I saw my car. I don't know what that thing was or how it knew my name, but I do know one thing. I'm never going back to that cabin again. I'm 34 years old. I took a long weekend. Figured I'd hit the mountains, camp a little, hike a little, let my brain deflate. Just me, the trees, and silence. That sounded perfect. I picked this trail I'd read about on some hiking forum called Ridgeway Loop. People said it was a moderate hike with a few good overlooks. And best part, not a lot of foot traffic. Honestly, that last bit sold me. I wasn't in the mood to make small talk with strangers in moisture-wicking shorts. I tossed my gear in the back of my old Jeep before sunrise and drove 5 hours. The towns got smaller, the roads got narrower, and finally it was just me and green. Hills rolling like waves. I could almost feel the stress unclenching from my shoulders as I drove deeper in. When I pulled up to the trailhead, the lot was empty, not another car in sight. Normally I'm not thrilled about total isolation because, serial killers. But that day it felt like a gift. I parked, stretched, checked my map, and hoisted on my pack. The air hit me first. Cool, clean, sharp, like it had never been breathed by anyone before. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about work. Wasn't thinking about anything but how good it felt to be out there. The first couple of miles were easy. The trail wound through tall, straight trees, their trunks like pillars holding up the sky. The ground was soft with old leaves, the kind that crunch just enough to remind you you're out in the wild, but not so much that you feel like an intruder. By midday, I came across a little creek with water so clear it looked fake. Figured that was my sign to set up camp. I pitched the tent, boiled some noodles on my camp stove, and ate sitting on a flat rock. The only sound was water sliding over stones. No cars, no voices, no endless hum of computers, just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you wonder why you live any other way. That night I made a small fire and stared at it until the stars blinked on. It felt good, simple, like life had dialed back to something I could handle. When my eyes started to droop, I crawled into my tent, zipped the flap, and let the stillness swallow me whole. The next morning I woke up early, The air had that sharp bite that makes you feel alive. So I grabbed a light day pack with some water and snacks and decided to hike higher up the ridge to find one of those overlooks the map bragged about. The climb was steeper than I expected, but my legs were eating it up. My lungs burned in the good way. And for a while, I forgot why I'd even come out there in the first place. That was until the trail markers disappeared. At first I figured I just missed one. No big deal. I walked back a few steps, scanned the trees for that bright orange blaze. Nothing, I shrugged. Trails don't just end right. The dirt path was still under my boots, worn and clear, so I trusted it. That's when it got weird. The first thing I saw was the rope hanging from a tree branch like some old sad noose. It looked wrong. The rope was frayed, blackened like it had been through a fire. The branch above, it was scorched in a perfect ring, as if someone had set a torch to just that spot and walked away. I stood there staring at it too long, thinking, who does that? Who burns one branch and leaves the rope? I kept moving, but slower now. The next thing was bones scattered across the dirt, pale as chalk. Not a full skeleton, just pieces, a rib. Something that looked like a femur, except it was too long, stretched thin in a way that didn't look right. My brain said deer. My gut said no. After that, the silence changed. It didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt heavy, pressing on my ears. Even my footsteps sounded wrong, too sharp, too loud, like they didn't belong there. That's when I told myself enough. You've seen plenty. Time to head back. So I turned around and realized nothing behind me looked the same. The slope was steeper. The trees were closer, crowded like they were leaning in, boxing me. I couldn't see the rope, couldn't see the bones, couldn't see anything familiar. And then I heard it. Not footsteps, not an animal, breathing, slow deliberate breathing, dragging air like syrup. Then the exhale wet and ragged, like it was scraping something raw inside. I froze, every muscle locked. It came again, closer this time, and then something else. A low mumble, not words I knew, just broken sounds, like someone trying to copy human speech and failing. My skin went cold. Every instinct screamed to run, but I couldn't move, not until I heard the third sound. Wood creaking, like something huge shifting its weight against a tree. I bolted. Branches slapped my arms, snapped against my face. But I didn't care. My lungs burned, my legs begged to quit, but I didn't stop. I didn't even know if I was on a trail anymore. I just kept moving, tearing through underbrush, heart hammering like it wanted out, then blew, my tarp, my campsite. I stumbled into the clearing, grabbed my pack with shaking hands, and didn't bother with the tent, didn't put out the fire. I just slung the straps over my shoulders and ran downhill like the forest was collapsing behind me. And then I made the mistake of looking back. Up the ridge between two trees, something stood. It was tall, too tall. Its head nearly brushed the branches. Its arms hung past its knees, long and thin like someone had stretched them wrong. Its skin was the color of wet bark, and its head tilted at an angle no neck should allow, cocked like a dog hearing something it doesn't understand. Then its mouth opened. No roar, no growl, just my name drawn out in a voice that sounded broken, dragged over teeth, mangled into something almost human. I don't remember much after that, just flashes of green, the taste of blood in my mouth from biting my tongue, the pounding in my skull as I ran. I didn't stop until the trees spat me out onto a gravel road. By the time I stumbled into the ranger station, I was half delirious. They told me I'd gone 7 miles off any marked trail, asked if I'd seen bears. I just shook my head. I didn't tell them what I saw, didn't have the words. I got in my Jeep and drove until those mountains were just a smear in my rear view. I was hiking a remote stretch of trail down in southern West Virginia when it happened. I had been planning the trip for weeks. I needed that. I parked at the trailhead around 9 in the morning. Blue sky above me, cool air that hit like a wake-up slap. The first few miles were easy, gentle slopes, wide stretches where you could see forever through the trees, birds chattering like they had gossip to share. I remember thinking, this is perfect. like I had picked the exact right place to disappear for a while. By early afternoon, I passed an old fire tower, rusted and broken, standing tall like something left behind after the world ended. Its metal frame poked through the tree line. For a moment, I thought about climbing it just for the view, but something about it felt wrong, like if I touched it, the whole thing would come crashing down, so I kept walking. That was when I noticed the footprints. At first it didn't register. The trail had been empty all day. No parked cars where I started. No hikers passing by. So when I saw them, I stopped. They were pressed into a patch of mud where rainwater had pooled. From a distance they looked like boot prints. But crouching closer made my stomach turn. The heel was too narrow. The toes stretched out long as if someone had pulled the front of the boot like taffy. And the tread looked warped. Not worn like old shoes, but twisted, melted, as if heat had distorted the pattern. The worst part, they were fresh, edges sharp, soil still damp inside the grooves. Whoever left them wasn't far. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a hunter with strange boots, maybe just shadows messing with my eyes. But the thought wouldn't leave me, so I picked up the pace. By late afternoon, I reached a fork. One trail dipped toward a stream, the other climbed the ridge. The map said the shelter was up past the ridge, so I started climbing. Each step felt heavier, like my pack had doubled in weight. The higher I went, the quieter it became. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of my boots and the pounding of my heartbeat. Halfway up I froze. The footprints were back. Same warped shape, same narrow heel and stretched toes, but this time sunk deeper into the mud like something heavier had passed. I followed them a short way, just trying to understand, but then they stopped right there in the middle of the trail. No rocks to step onto, no tracks leading off. Just gone, like whatever left them had vanished into thin air. I reached the ridge. As the sun was bleeding out across the horizon, the shelter sat in a small clearing. Weathered but still standing, a wooden platform inside, a blackened fire ring out front. No sign of anyone else. It should have made me feel safer, but it didn't. I went through the motions, filtered water, boiled noodles, hung my food bag in a tree. Each movement mechanical, like I was pretending to be calm. By the time I crawled into my sleeping bag, night had swallowed the clearing. I must have dozed off because the sound came out of nowhere. Slow, dragging, something brushing against the outside walls of the shelter. I froze, my breathing shallow. Like that would make me invisible. The steps circled the shelter one at a time. I could feel vibrations in the wood beneath me. When it reached the back wall, the sound changed. Sharp hollow pops like two stones knocking together in uneven rhythm. Click, click, pause, then silence. I don't know how long I lay there before fumbling for my headlamp. My hands shook so badly I could barely flip the switch. When the beam finally cut through the dark, I swept it across the clearing. That's when I saw it, standing at the edge of the light. It was tall, impossibly tall. Limbs stretched long with joints bending in ways joints should never bend. Skin pale and tight like plastic stretched over sticks. The head was wrong, narrow at the top, wide at the jaw, and its mouth glistened with teeth catching the light. Even though its lips weren't moving, it tilted its head in sharp jerks like a bird. Then the clicking started again, but its mouth stayed shut. The sound was no longer just from it. It came from the trees, the ground, everywhere at once. I edged backward slowly toward my pack, never taking my eyes off it. The thing didn't move. Just twitched its head like it was studying me, deciding something. When my hand finally brushed the straps, I grabbed my pack and ran. I didn't care about the trail. I crashed straight into the trees. Branches tearing at my arms, snaps and cracks chasing me through the dark. The clicking grew louder, faster, until it sounded like 100 teeth chattering all around me. My lungs burned. My legs turned to lead. When I stumbled into a stream, I didn't hesitate. I waded in up to my knees and followed it downstream. Water freezing against my skin until I finally saw the glint of a guardrail through the trees. When I climbed up onto the road, my legs nearly gave out. A truck came by about an hour later. The driver barely asked questions. just stared at me through the rearview while I shook in the back seat. I never went back for my gear. 2 days later, a ranger called. They found my food bag still hanging in a tree, but the shelter, it wasn't there. I thought he meant it had burned down, but no, he said there was nothing there at all. I had been on that trail before, but never this far out and never in winter. The cold changes everything in the mountains. The trees were stripped bare, their branches clawing at the gray sky. The ground felt soft and spongy under my boots from months of rotting leaves. I started out around 10, planning to hit the overlook, eat a quick sandwich, and make it back before the sun dipped. 12 miles round trip, 6 up and 6 down. It felt doable. I had done harder, about 2 hours in. I noticed the quiet, not just quieter, but silent. The kind of silence that doesn't announce itself, it just happens. One moment you hear the background noise of the woods, a woodpecker tapping, a squirrel scattering leaves, branches creaking in the wind, then nothing, like someone shut the whole world off. It didn't hit me right away. I kept walking until it finally clicked. Then I stopped and just listened, my breath fogged in the air. But there were no birds, no wind, not even the groan of trees shifting, just the sound of my boots grinding the frozen dirt and the heavy thud of my heartbeat. I told myself it wasn't strange. Animals go still in the cold, right? Birds hunker down, deer stop moving, the forest gets quiet. But the way it happened, so sudden, like someone flicked a switch, that felt wrong. The trail narrowed as it climbed along a rock face. One of those stretches where a single bad step means sliding 30 feet into boulders below. On my left, the stone wall was slick with ice. On my right, the drop waited. I kept my eyes on the ground, counting steps like a kid on a balance beam. That's when I saw something dark against the pale ground ahead. At first I thought it was a scrap of fabric. People lose things on trails all the time. Gloves, hats, trash. But when I got closer, I saw it wasn't fabric, it was hair, a clump of black coarse strands, matted with something that looked too dark to be mud. Thick strands stuck together like they'd been ripped out, not shed. I crouched but didn't touch it, just stared. My stomach tightened. It wasn't the size alone, it was the way it lay there. Like it didn't belong, too much for a squirrel, wrong texture for a deer, definitely not bear. My first thought was a dog, maybe a hunting hound, but there was no blood, no paw prints, nothing. I should have turned back. Everything in me knew it, but I didn't. I kept walking. Another half-mile up, I saw something else, leaning against a fallen log. At first it looked like a stick, but as I got closer I realized it was bone, long, smooth, and wrong. Too thin for a deer leg, too clean to be random. The ends weren't sharp, they were polished smooth, like they'd been gnawed or worn down. Then I saw the footprints. They were pressed into a patch of soil that hadn't frozen. Big enough to be human, but barefoot. The toes curled inward, sharp and hooked like claws. The arches were too high. Unnatural. Whoever left them didn't walk like us. That was when the voice in my head stopped whispering and started screaming, "Get out!" But I didn't turn back. The thought of going down the trail felt worse than going forward. It was like the silence itself was pushing me to the overlook. Like if I turned my back, something would be right behind me. The trail ended at the ridge, no more path, just a sheer drop into miles of gray-green hills stretching under a flat sky. I should have felt relief. Instead I felt exposed, like standing in a wide open field during a lightning storm. That's when I heard it behind me, not footsteps, but a dragging sound, something sliding through the leaves, long pulls, then a pause, then closer. I turned. It was standing at the tree line. At first my brain tried to call it a man. It was crouched low, arms hanging down nearly to the ground. But when it shifted, I knew it wasn't human. The body was too thin, too long. Its skin looked wrong. Not just pale but off, like stretched leather left out in the rain. The head was all wrong, too big, too heavy, lolling forward like the neck couldn't hold it. It didn't move fast, it just stood there, its spine bending in slow arcs, joints popping like it had extras. Then came the sound, a wet clicking noise. Again and again, like teeth chattering with no lips to cover them, I started backing toward the cliff. Every nerve screamed run, but my legs felt locked. My breath came short and ragged. The thing tilted its head like it was curious, like it wanted to see inside me. Then it dropped, slammed flat against the ground so fast it looked like gravity. Yanked it down, and it crawled, not like a person, not like an animal. Its arms and legs bent the wrong way, joints cracking loud enough to echo. The clicking never stopped. That broke me. I ran. I don't remember the first 100 yards. Just trees whipping past, boots slipping on ice. Every time I stumbled, I felt it just behind me. Close enough to grab my legs. I never heard normal footsteps. Just the scrape, drag, click, click, faster and sharper. I lost the trail twice. Tore through brush, ripped my hands open on rocks. My lungs burned so bad I tasted blood. My vision tunneled. But I didn't stop, not until I saw the glint of my truck through the trees. I hit the door so hard it bounced back, dove inside, slammed it shut, jammed the key into the ignition with shaking hands. When the engine roared, I heard one last click. Close, too close. I didn't look back. I threw the truck in gear and tore. Down the dirt road, the wheel jerked under my grip, but I didn't care. I haven't gone back to that ridge. I have lived in the Blue Ridge foothills my entire life. Out here, you learn the back roads before you even know the main highway. That is just the way things work. My dad used to say the mountains had their own rules. He told me, the ridges will keep secrets if you know how to look for them. I never thought much about that until the night I realized the ridge might want to keep me. It was late on a Sunday in March, just before dark. One of those evenings where you feel like you have already done enough for the day, but somehow you are still doing more. I had been at my cousin's place helping him split wood. He lives far up past the last stretch of pavement where the mailbox is nailed to a tree and the road feels more like a suggestion than a road. The shortcut home from there is a logging track that winds 20 miles through the forest before dropping back near town. I had taken it more times than I could count. It was not a smooth ride, full of ruts and ditches you had to straddle, but it saved me half an hour. I liked the quiet out there. That day, though, the quiet felt different. It was heavy, pressing down on me. A storm had rolled through earlier, short and angry, full of wind and hard rain. Now everything was wet and gray. The world looked washed out. No birds, no bugs. Just the sound of my tires sucking and slapping through the mud as I crawled along. About 6 miles in, I hit a tree. A big poplar stretched across the track like someone had placed it there on purpose. Its roots were torn out on one side, clawing at the sky. I killed the engine, stepped out, and walked around to see if I could move it. That was when I froze. The entire underside of the trunk was stripped bare of bark, not ragged like it had scraped the ground, but shaved smooth. The roots looked worse. Something had chewed through them, not broken, not splintered, chewed, deep grooves curled into themselves like hooks, big enough you could slide your fingers into if you were foolish enough to try. It did not make sense. Too big for a beaver, too strange for a bear. The longer I stared, the more the back of my neck prickled. I walked back to the truck and grabbed my phone, thinking I would call my cousin for his saw. No signal, not even a flicker. I sat in the cab gripping the wheel, running through my options: backtrack 20 miles in fading light, or try to move a tree that looked heavier than my truck. Neither felt right. That was when I heard it, a scrape of metal against stone. Not from the woods, but from under the truck. Every muscle locked. The keys were still in my hand. I had not even started the engine yet. Slowly I opened the door, crouched down, and looked underneath. Nothing, just mud and leaves clinging to the frame. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. Probably just a rock shifting, maybe my nerves. I stood up, brushing mud from my jeans, and then I saw it. Movement between the trees. Not a deer, not anything I knew. It was pale, low to the ground, moving too fast. It glided, almost like a piece of paper sliding across a floor. I only caught a flash before it melted into the dark, but it was enough to twist my gut. I climbed back into the truck and slammed the lock down. My heart was hammering so loud it echoed in my ears. The woods were dead silent now. No wind, no dripping branches, nothing. Then the scraping came back. Not under the truck this time, but on the bed. Slow drags like claws across metal. I stared through the rear window, breath fogging the glass. Nothing but gray trees and my reflection. I told myself I was imagining it, that the storm had rattled me. Then the tailgate slammed. A single heavy hit like something dropped onto it. From above, the whole truck jolted forward. I did not think. I did not breathe. I jammed the key in and twisted. The engine roared to life. I floored it. The tires spun in the mud before catching, and then I was flying. Branches whipped the mirrors. Mud spit everywhere. Half a mile later, I made the mistake of looking in the mirror. It was there, running down the track. No longer crawling, but upright, twisted, its shoulders bent like broken wings. Arms so long they nearly scraped the ground as it ran. Its head hung forward, jaw swinging too wide, swinging like it was barely attached. Its skin was white, glowing against the dark, and its eyes were two black holes, swallowing everything. I floored it harder. The truck fishtailed, nearly clipped a tree. But I kept going until the woods broke open and the tires hit asphalt. I did not stop for 10 miles. When I finally did, I was shaking so hard, I could barely turn the key off. I walked to the back. The tailgate was bent inward, deep grooves curled along the metal, sharp enough to catch a fingernail. I drove straight to my cousin's and told him everything. I sold the truck the next week, and I never take the logging road anymore. My uncle had this old hunting cabin buried so deep in the Appalachian, it might as well have been on another planet. No GPS, no cell signal. 3 hours from the nearest town, 2 from the closest gas station, and surrounded by a forest that feels older than time. When I called him to ask if I could stay for the weekend, he hesitated. Not long, but enough for me to notice. Then he said, "Sure, don't expect much. It's rough out there." His voice had this weight, like he wanted to add something else, but didn't. I laughed and asked, "Anything I should know?" "Yeah," he said flatly. "Keep the generator off at night. It leaks fuel sometimes," I joked. "Got it. No explosions. Anything else?" His pause stretched long enough that I thought the line had dropped. Then he said, "Don't wander after dark. You'll get turned around out there." That was it. No explanation, no story, just a flat warning that stayed with me the whole drive. Up, the road felt endless, switchbacks curling up the mountains like some giant snake. Ridges stood black against a sky that couldn't decide between dusk and night. By the time I hit the dirt track leading in, the sun was gone. The truck rattled over potholes and gravel. Trees leaned so close my headlights bounced shadows across the windshield. At some point, it stopped feeling like a road and more like a tunnel carved out of the woods. The cabin was smaller than I remembered, a sagging box with a porch that looked ready to slide off one side. The steps groaned as I walked up, and when I opened the door, the smell hit me. Old pine dust mixed with something faintly metallic, like wet nails in a rusted toolbox. Inside was simple: 1 bedroom, a kitchen with a hand pump, a living room with a stone fireplace that looked like it hadn't seen fire in decades. Silence filled the space so heavy it pressed down. I dropped my bag, cooked a quick meal on the propane stove, and sat on the porch until the last of the light was gone. Out here, darkness doesn't creep in slow. It slams down. 1 second the ridges were silhouettes. The next they were swallowed whole. I locked the door, shut off the lamps, and stretched my sleeping bag across the couch. For a while I just stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of my own ears in the silence. Sleep came in broken drifts, each time snapping awake with my heart racing, like it heard something before I did. At first I blamed the old wood popping, nerves, anything I could tell myself, until I heard the scrape, not loud, just enough to cut through half sleep. a slow drag. Like something sliding against the wall outside, I froze. My mind scrambled for excuses: tree branch, wind, raccoon. The forest is full of strange sounds. I almost believed it, until it came again, longer this time. Scrape, pause, scrape. Not random, deliberate. Like someone tracing a finger along the wall, I slid from the sleeping bag. Bare feet cold against the planks. The hatchet I'd used earlier leaned by the wall. My hand found it without thought. My body deciding before my brain. I stood gripping it tight, staring at the door. Then it came again, closer this time, right by the kitchen window. And with it came a sound I wish it could unhear. A long, wet breath drawn slow against the wood, like something savoring the feel of it. Every instinct screamed, "Stay quiet." I crept toward the kitchen. Floorboards sighing under my weight. Each creak a gunshot in the silence. My fingers found the curtain's edge. I pulled it back a sliver. Only black met me, my own pale reflection. And beyond it, shadows layered on shadows. My eyes wanted to shape them into figures. And yet, I swear something moved. Not a full form, just the sense of the night itself shifting closer. The scraping stopped. Silence dropped so heavy it rang. Then came the footsteps, slow, heavy, circling the cabin. I backed away, holding my breath small, hatchet raised. The steps faded, soft at first, then gone. Minutes stretched, 1, 2, 5. Nothing but the groaning of old wood. I didn't sleep. After that, I sat on the floor, back against the couch, hatchet across my knees, eyes fixed on the door. Until the first pale gray of dawn touched the windows. When light finally filled the room, I stepped outside. The yard glistened with dew. Cold air sharpened my lungs. That's when I saw them. Tracks, not boots, not paws. A straight line from the porch into the trees, each one deep enough to hold water. Split in two like hooked blades carving the earth. I followed. God help me. I had to know. They stretched 30, maybe 40 yards into the undergrowth. Then stopped. No leaves disturbed, no branches broken, just nothing. Like whatever made them had walked straight out of existence. That broke something in me. I ran back, stuffed my gear into the bag, and threw it into the truck. The engine roared. Like it wanted me gone. The road blurred past in a rush of gravel and switchbacks. I told myself it was over. I was fine, safe, but then, at the last bend before the highway, I saw it, crouched at the tree line. Watching me go, its skin was pale, stretched too thin over bones that jutted at wrong angles like a body built from a crumpled blueprint smoothed back out. Its arms were too long, hands dragging furrows in the dirt like wet ropes. Its head tilted slow as I sped past, jaw opening wider and wider until it looked like the whole skull might split in two. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. My shift at the ranger station ended around 7 that evening. I often stayed late since hikers like to stretch the daylight in summer, but the trails had been empty for hours. I lingered anyway, shuffling papers and pretending to work. The truth was I didn't want to go home. Home was a rented cabin buried deep in the hollow. People call that kind of place peaceful, like it's a compliment. No neighbors, no traffic. Nothing but miles of forest swallowing everything. At first I thought it was perfect. Cheap rent, quiet nights, plenty of space. But after a few months, the quiet didn't feel like quiet anymore. It felt like the woods were listening. That night, instead of taking the paved route, I cut down the old service road that runs along the ridge before dropping into the valley. Nobody really uses it anymore. Logging trucks once did, but that ended years back. The road was long, rough, full of blind curves and loose gravel that made the tires hum. It added almost 20 minutes to the trip, but I didn't mind. I just wanted time before pulling into that cabin again. The sun was gone by the time I hit gravel. The headlights cut a narrow path through the dark. Flashes of pale tree trunks appeared and disappeared. Briars twisted together like wire. Cicadas started and stopped without warning. Each silence sharp enough to make me tense. About 10 minutes down the road, I spotted something stretched across the gravel. At first I thought it was a deer. It happens often. They freeze in headlights, get hit by trucks, stagger off and collapse. But the closer I got, the less sense it made. The shape was wrong, too long, stretched thin as if it had been pulled from both ends. My gut tightened without me realizing. I stopped about 20 feet away, engine idling, headlights full on, whatever. It was still breathing, slow and steady. Not the shallow breaths of a wounded animal, but deliberate. I gripped the wheel and waited, hoping it would move in some way that made sense. It didn't. I tapped the horn. The sound cracked through the trees and bounced back. Still nothing. I should have reversed right then. That would have been smart, but I didn't. I put it in park and stepped out. The air was heavy and damp. Gravel crunched under my boots as I moved past the hood. Shadows stretched long across the tree line. Every nerve screamed stop, but my legs kept going. I got within 10 feet before freezing. What I thought was fur was skin, gray and slick, stretched so thin I could see lines beneath it, like veins or bone. The arms were too long and bent at sharp angles. Fingers spread wide like it was gripping the dirt. Its head was turned, not to the side like someone lying down, but backward, turned so far it didn't look possible. Then it moved, slow and steady. One arm bent and pulled forward, fingers scraping the gravel as it dragged itself an inch. I stumbled back hard and slammed into the car, fumbling for the handle, half diving inside. My breath came too fast. That's when I heard it. Faint at first, then louder, a clicking sound, deliberate, coming from its throat. I looked over the roof of the car. It was rising now, bent wrong. At the joints like the bones weren't where they should be. The head twisted fully around. Facing me, the eyes were wide and round, too far apart. Black and hollow like holes punched through wet paper. No shine, no reflection, just emptiness. And then it stood, slow, smooth, unfolding, taller than me, taller than the car. Arms hanging so low the fingers nearly brushed the ground. The clicking grew faster, sharper, like a broken metronome. I slammed the door, floored the gas. Gravel spit behind me as the tires caught and the car lurched forward. I didn't look back until I reached pavement. When I finally did, it was standing in the middle of the road, perfectly still, watching the taillights fade. I didn't sleep at all that night. I have been doing power line inspections for 6 years now. That means long drives, coffee in gas station parking lots, and endless hours in places where you can go half a day without seeing another soul. If you have never been out here in the Appalachian Mountains, it is hard to explain how deep they really get. It feels like the land folds in on itself, swallowing everything, until the roads are nothing but scars disappearing into the brush. There are places where your GPS quits before you even hit the first turn. After that, you are on your own. The world narrows down to mud, rock, and trees that lean in like they are tired of letting you pass. Last fall, I was sent out to check an outage up on Mill Branch Ridge. Nobody outside the locals even calls it that, and you will not find it labeled on any map. It is one of those places that does not exist on paper, but everyone nearby knows it. They do not talk about it much, and when they do, it is quick in passing. Like, do not drive that way after dark. They make it sound like a warning about potholes or maybe meth labs. But there is something in their voices, a sharp edge, like they know more than they are willing to say. Dispatch said the line went dead after a storm. Probably a blown insulator or a tree on the wires. Simple work. I loaded the truck, checked my gear twice, and rolled out before sunrise to beat the fog. The first hour was easy. County pavement, a few flickering gas stations, stray dogs chasing the utility truck like it was sport. But the deeper I drove, the emptier it got. The last house I passed looked like it belonged in a ghost story. 2 stories high, leaning on stilts over a 6-slow creek. Windows black, no curtains, no life. The mailbox bent so far forward, it looked like it was bowing in defeat. Past it, the gravel started and everything else stopped. No signal, no houses, no signs. Just bare trees clawing at the gray sky, closing so tight it felt like I was driving through the ribs of something dead. When I reached the gate, it was nothing but a rusted chain looped through two posts, leaning like they had been there since before asphalt was a thing. The padlock so corroded, I had to throw my full weight on the wrench to crack it. Company rules say you log the time, place, and conditions before leaving the road. I pulled out my phone. No bars, not a flicker, no surprise. I drove in anyway, tires slid in ruts that had turned into trenches of mud from the storm. The cut line was barely wider than my truck, brush closing in like it wanted to erase the path behind me. The only sound was the engine groaning and branches scraping the mirrors like fingernails. I made it 2 miles before the grade grew too steep. I parked on a flat patch, threw on my vest, and walked pole to pole with the scope. The first few poles were fine, hardware intact, no scorch marks. It barely looked like the storm touched the place. Then I reached pole 117. That is when it felt wrong. The ground was not just wet. It was black, not dark brown mud, but black like oil bled from the earth. A perfect circle around the base, slick and heavy, not running off, not pooling, just sinking straight into the dirt, like the earth had rotted from inside out. And in the middle was something pale. At first I thought it was bark or maybe a deer bone washed in by rain. I crouched, brushed the muck, and froze. It was not bone. It looked like skin, gray, wrinkled, stretched thin like parchment over ridges that looked like tendons. I was still staring when it twitched. A ripple, like a muscle spasm under the surface. I stumbled back so fast I nearly fell. My first thought was some half-dead animal barely alive. Then I heard it, a sound I still feel in my teeth when I remember. Not breath, not a growl, but a wet click. Deliberate, like someone pressing their tongue to the roof of their mouth, but wrong, too hollow, too deep, like a throat that had never learned how to make noise. I swung my light toward the tree line. At first nothing, just trunks fading into shadow. Then something slid low to the ground between two trees like smoke before pulling itself upright. And I wished I had not seen it. It stood on 2 legs. But that was the only human thing about it. Too tall, too thin, arms so long the hooked fingers brushed its knees. The same gray-white skin, slick and hairless. The skin in the mud had been part of it. Where eyes should have been were hollows. Not empty, but darker than the skin around them. Pits where light just died. Its mouth opened. No. It split. The jaw peeled in 2 directions, cracking like a log splitting apart. Until its head looked broken, I backed away slow, then faster. My boots sank into the oily muck as every nerve screamed to run. The smell hit me, metallic and sweet, copper like blood soaking in water too long. The thing moved without sound, no twigs snapping, no leaves. Its legs bent wrong, its spine arched back so far it looked like it would scrape the sky. I hit the truck door with my hip, fumbled the keys with shaking hands, dropped them once. Somehow I jammed them in and turned. The roar of the engine split the silence like a gunshot. That was when I saw it at the edge of the clearing. Head cocked, mouth working open and shut in silent gulps. I slammed the gas. Mud spat high, tires screamed. I did not look back for the first 100 yards. When I finally did, I wished I had not. It was running on all fours now, joints folding like a spider, jerking in bursts that closed the distance too fast. Not fast enough to catch me, but not slow enough to ease the panic either. Mud splashed across its pale body, and it never blinked. Just as I hit the last bend before the gate, it stopped. It rose again on 2 legs, bent like a question mark, head tilting side to side, slow, curious, like it was memorizing me. Even when the trees swallowed it, I swear those hollows burned through me. I did not breathe right until I hit pavement 20 minutes later. My boots were still slick with that black muck. The truck cab still stank of copper-sweet rot. I logged the outage as cleared, told no one. If I had, they would laugh, or worse, they would send me back with some safety guy shadowing me. Pole 117 is still on my route, but every time I get assigned that sector, 1 trade shifts, because I know what I saw. I had been driving since late afternoon. heading home from a long week on a job site in Virginia, back to western Kentucky. All I wanted was to get home, shower, and sleep in my own bed. I hated the interstate. Too straight, too dull, like being trapped on a conveyor belt. So when the GPS suggested a rural mountain route that saved an hour, I thought, why not? At first it was fine, winding roads, endless trees, a little backwoods Americana charm. But the deeper I drove, the stranger it felt. The curves weren't just sharp, they were endless. Switchback after switchback, like the road was folding in on itself. What started as 2 lanes narrowed into cracked pavement barely wide enough for my SUV. No guardrails, just a thin white line. And then a sheer drop if I took a curve wrong. By the time the sun slipped behind the ridges, I realized how isolated I was. When night fell, the world collapsed into 2 things: the white tunnel of my headlights and the blur of black trees whipping past. Number houses, no mailboxes, no lights, just me, the car, and the road. After a while, that emptiness started to crawl under my skin. You know that prickling feeling when you notice you haven't seen another car in forever? No headlights coming at me, no taillights ahead, just black road stretching on. And then I noticed my fuel gauge. A hair under a quarter tank, normally not a big deal. But out here with no towns, no gas stations, no towers, it felt like a countdown. My brain started feeding me every worst case: running out of gas in the dark, freezing in the car all night. Or worse, someone finding me stranded. I told myself I'd pull over at the first safe spot, stretch, check the GPS, then keep moving. A few miles later, I spotted a small gravel pull-off just wide enough for 2 cars. It felt like luck. I eased onto it, shut off the engine, and sat there listening to the tick of the cooling motor. That's when I felt it. The silence. Not peaceful silence, but dead hollow silence. The kind that makes your ears ring. And then through it came a sound, faint, sharp, a click, from somewhere past the tree line. I thought maybe a branch in the wind. Then it came again, click, slow, uneven, deliberate. It didn't sound like wind. It didn't sound like footsteps either, more like tapping, like nails on a hard floor. But wrong. Like whatever was making it didn't quite understand how to move its legs. I opened the door and stepped out, my boots crunching loud against the gravel. I stretched, trying to look casual, but my body was tense, stiff. The clicking sound stayed steady in the same rhythm. And then I heard something else, breathing, long, slow inhales, short, rough exhales, faint but heavy. I held my breath just to make sure. Yes, breathing. That's when the thought hit me. It could be a bear, a coyote, or worse, a person. The idea of someone out there in the trees making that noise, just standing and breathing. It twisted my stomach. I told myself to ignore it. Check the GPS and leave. I leaned into the SUV for my phone. No service. Figures. As I turned to climb back in, I saw them. Eyes. Not glowing, but catching just enough of the dome light to shine like 2 dull coins in the dark. They were low at first, too low for a person. Then they rose, slow, deliberate, and something stepped out from the tree line. It was tall, easily over 7 feet, its limbs wrong, too long, too thin, bending in ways that looked impossible. Every move was careful, like it was imitating something human, but not getting it right. Its head tilted in sharp little jerks, bird-like, and its face, God, its face, almost human, almost like someone tried to sketch a person from memory but scrambled the details. Eyes set too far apart, mouth stretched too wide. Everything distorted. I froze, my body locked. My brain screamed to run, but I couldn't move. Then it opened its mouth and spoke. Not in its own voice, but in mine. My exact voice, same tone, same pitch, and it said one word: run. I don't even remember choosing to. I just moved. I dove into the SUV so fast I smashed my shoulder against the doorframe. My keys slipped from my hand and hit the floor mat. While I scrambled, the clicking started again. Faster now, circling the vehicle, scraping gravel on both sides. Too fast. Too smooth for something that large. I shoved the key in. The engine roared. I slammed the gear into drive and floored it. Gravel spit out as the SUV lurched back onto the road. In the mirror for just a second, I saw it standing in the pull-off. Head tilted, arms hanging like broken branches, just watching. I didn't slow down. Didn't dare look back. My hands clamped the wheel and my foot crushed the gas. The curves blurred past, tires squealing on every turn. When I finally saw the glow of a diner sign miles later, I swerved into the lot so hard I nearly clipped a trash can. I parked and sat gripping the wheel, my hands shaking so bad my fingers ached. I didn't go inside, didn't eat. I just sat there staring at the empty road behind me, knowing whatever that thing was, it hadn't been human. My dad had an old hunting cabin deep in the Appalachians. It was seriously out there. No cell service, no neighbors, nothing but mountains and trees in every direction. It had been built by his grandfather and used for deer season, but that winter, it had sat empty for months, right before a big snowstorm was set to roll in. Dad asked me to ride up with him to check on it. He wanted to grab some gear he left behind and make sure the roof was still holding up. I didn't mind. Growing up, those trips were some of my favorite memories, me, Dad, and the woods back then. It felt like an adventure, but when you return as an adult, the feeling changes. The mountains seem larger, the silence feels heavier, and you realize how truly alone you are out there. We left late in the afternoon. I told him it was a bad idea, but he brushed it off with a laugh. "We'll make it before dark," he said. I drove most of the way while he navigated. With every passing mile, it felt like we were peeling back layers of civilization. First the gas stations vanished, then the houses, then even the power lines, until it was nothing but winding switchbacks cutting through endless trees. By the time we turned onto the dirt road, the sun had gone. The headlights lit nothing but bare trunks and patches of old snow clinging like mold to the ground. I asked if we should turn back and return in the morning. Dad shook his head. Better to finish now. That road was barely a road at all. Deep frozen ruts, potholes wide enough to eat a tire, branches scraping along the truck. I crawled forward, slow, gripping the wheel. That's when something darted across the beams, moving low on all fours. It wasn't a deer, I knew instantly. The body was too long, the limbs too thin. It didn't bound like a deer either. It glided smooth and low, like it poured from one side of the road to the other, and then it was gone. My hands clenched white around the wheel. I asked Dad what it was. He just said probably nothing, keep driving. But his voice was too careful, too calm. He was lying when the cabin came into view. It looked smaller than I remembered, hunched against the tree line like it wanted to disappear. I parked and killed the engine. Silence fell heavy around us. Number wind, no bugs, just stillness pressing in. Inside it smelled like old wood and dust. The same rickety table, the same stone fireplace, the same two bunks crammed in the corner. I got a fire started while Dad walked the perimeter. When he came back, he locked the door. He had never done that before. "You expecting company?" I joked, but my voice cracked. He muttered, "Never hurts," and sat down. We ate canned chili in silence, only the fire and the scrape of my spoon breaking it. I kept thinking about what I saw on the road, the way it moved, those long limbs, how it slipped away so fast. I tried to convince myself it was just headlights playing tricks. Then we heard it, a scraping sound against the wall outside. Not wood creaking, not the wind, deliberate, slow, like claws dragging deep into the siding. It started at the back and crept toward the door. Dad froze, spoon still in his hand, his eyes locked on mine. Then he set it down, stood without a word, and grabbed his rifle. My pulse pounded so hard it filled my ears. He yanked the door open quick, flashlight slicing the dark. Nothing but the truck shining with frost and the smear of black trees. "Stay here," he ordered. He stepped off the porch, boots crunching in snow. His beam swung across the clearing, then he disappeared around the side. Seconds later, I heard him curse, low and sharp. When he came back, his face was pale. "Pack up now." "What, why?" I started, but he snapped, "Do what I said." I shoved gear into my bag, my hands shaking so hard I dropped the flashlight twice. Then I glanced through the window and froze. Tracks in the snow, not boots, not paws. Long, narrow impressions spaced. Too far apart, like something crawled on hands and feet, but stretched out unnaturally. Grooves where fingers had dug deep. We didn't speak as we loaded the truck. Dad kept the rifle raised, scanning the trees and the roof. I climbed in. Heart slamming so hard, I thought it might crack a rib. The engine roared, and the truck lurched. Forward, that's when I saw it again. A flicker in the trees, low and fast. Weaving between trunks, keeping pace. Every time the headlights caught a gap, I swore I saw its arms swinging too low. Its head hanging, legs bending wrong. It didn't move like man or beast. It slid smooth, silent, like water spilling downhill. The road out felt endless. Every bump rattled the frame like a gunshot. Once I glanced back, and in the glow of the taillights I saw it crouched at the edge of the road, perfectly still, watching. We didn't breathe until the dirt turned to pavement and the forest thinned. Even then Dad didn't slow down. Miles later, when the first streetlights appeared, he finally spoke. That wasn't an animal. His voice was hollow, the words heavy. He didn't look at me. Didn't say another word the rest of the drive. We never went back to that cabin.